And we're live.
Good morning again. We're ready to begin the plenary talks. And our first speaker this morning is Neal Sarahan. Neal is the executive director for NAMI NAMI Houston, and he has Aditi Chokshi this morning with him. And Neal, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, friends. And I just want to confirm that I am live.
Yes, you are live.
Oh, I thank you very much. We are absolutely delighted to be here with you. You know, in the National Alliance of Mental Illness, there is a tradition and a program called In Our Own Voice, where the community of people who are affected by mental illness, the families, the participants, those people who are affected by mental illness and mental wellness challenges have a chance to address the community about their own lived experience. And so Aditi, Chokshi, and I are both family members, and I am a person living with mental health challenges. And we wanted to talk to you today about sharing our experience. We have 3 chapters to our experience. The title of our talk is Making Place. And we have 3 chapters. One is faith, one is purpose, and the 3rd chapter is COVID. How does that connect in our days? So what we wanted to start out with was some stories from our lives that will inform this practice of what healing is, what health is, and so that's where we're going to start today. We want to start in our own voice. Aditi, do you want to go first on your story of faith, chapter 1? Or shall I?
Do that.
Okay.
I could go first.
Hey, I love you.
It's such a pleasure to be here with everybody. You know, when I think about faith, it's so inextricably linked to my family story. And one thing I've realized that I share in kinship with anybody who cares for someone who has a struggle is this idea of faith that's kind of our northern star. It's like a magnet that pulls us forward. And, you know, anytime, whether it's through NAMI or through other parts of my life that I find somebody, I feel like that kinship really connects us. And that idea of faith as one step at a time, forward, and pulling us forward. You know, in the Hindu tradition, there's a word that ended up being a big part of my spiritual grounding for that idea of that magnet that kind of draws me forward. And it's dharma. And dharma is traditionally translated as duty. But I feel like duty has a connotation of obligation, and it doesn't quite capture the spirit of the word. What I think better does is this idea of a commitment that sets us free. And so I think the idea of dharma is an important one in my sense of spirituality. But I also wanted to just take a moment to share that, you know, there's current things about my life with my family. My Dr. Neal and I met because of my younger brother, who's thriving right now, in no small part to Dr. Neal and the cast of characters a decade and a half ago that first met him. And there's other folks in my family too, and that there is an idea of faith that draws me forward as I think about that. But I wanted to take a moment to talk about my grandmother, who I didn't get to know very much. And this idea of faith also is kind of a life force from our ancestors that push us forward. and I feel like my grandmother, who I didn't even know, is part of that force and that faith in me that's not pulling me somewhere, but it's actually pushing me and guiding me. And she was an extraordinary woman, so strong. She faced a number of her own struggles. She was a mom to my uncle who had profound learning differences. She grew up in India with not very much money at all. And when she was in her teenage years, her father suffered what we would call, we really need to come up with a better name than saying something like a psychotic break, but that's what her father struggled with when she was a teenager. And I remember in my own work in India at some point learning from her brother, from my uncle, that when she was young, a lot of folks would tell her, her aunts and just people who really were supposed to love and care for her. As soon as that happened to her father, somebody told her, Ganda bapni chokri ne paran se kon, which means who on earth would marry the daughter of an insane person? And I just think of how strong my daddy was. And in that time, in a society where as a young woman, everything depends on your ability to be married or not, just how much that one sentence might have echoed in her life and made her not able to see how strong she is. And if we fast forward all the way to the tail end of her life, she buckled under the weight of her responsibility. And in my own explorations in India, I came to know that about a week before she passed, she had told a neighbor, if I ever die, I'd like to be buried in this sari. And I just think that those two sentences, one that really made her feel so small, and the other that was her bright light reaching out, they are part of the stories in my family that are that life force that push me forward. And I wonder, for each of us as we're beginning, what might we share in kinship in that life force from our past that's also our faith that pushes us forward? And I wonder yours, Dr. Neal.
Amazing story. And I'm watching the clock and it's 8 minutes and I have, give me 1 minute to describe my story, if I could, please. I'm one of 10 children. In keeping with the national norms of how many of us are going to be challenged by mental health challenges. 2 of my sisters were profoundly affected in their mental and physical. Fortunately, not in their spiritual. I'm so delighted to say that because of my mom and dad. But I went to Catholic schools. Catholic schools were, I learned in Catholic schools that Catholic meant universal. Catholic meant all including. And yet my sisters were never included. And that's my story. There's a wealth of story to that. But my sisters, Patty, whose birthday is tomorrow, Mary, who was born in 1947, were never included in their faith communities or in schools. Now that led to me to chapter 2. And chapter 2 is about purpose. And can I take this one to start with, Aditi? The idea of purpose is that Patty and Mary were part of my life and my whole family's. And and I believe that purpose in me stays so became, how do I make place for Patty and Mary? And then that grew. That grew. In my graduate career, it was, how do I make place for youngsters? It went into special education. How do I make place for those people who are typically excluded from school? And it has had me travel all the way to NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. How do I commit in purpose to the responsibility? See, Patty and Mary could not make place by themselves. So whose job is that? Whose job in a faith-filled world is that? That's my story of. That's maybe my North Star, Aditi. That's the commitment that it takes, and it took a lot of sifting out and sorting out. I thought I was going to be in government. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to be this and that, but that faith and that purpose led me forth. Now it's 11 minutes and 34 seconds. Aditi, what do you got?
I just want to take a second to belonging sounds wonderful, but it sometimes sounds like a lofty value or a goal. And I just, in knowing Dr. Neal for as long as I've known him, I just love the simplicity of make place for. It's such a simple and direct and active verb, and it resonates with me as a North Star also. You know, a lot of my purpose has taken me to blend the personal and the professional. I studied, development economics and poverty alleviation policy, but when I would work in really underserved places, I think that the things that I noticed were because of my family stories. They were because of that life force. And so, in the spirit of stories, I think something that stands out to me as I think about community mental health work was I was working in a village in tribal Chhattisgarh. It's a place where, per capita income is something like $3,000 a year. And this woman whose 5 or 6-year-old son had epilepsy had walked 2 hours to come to the patient support group meetings that we were hosting for epilepsy. He was 6 years old, not a baby anymore, and she had carried him 2 hours. And as soon as she got to the meeting, the first thing she said was, I have to go home. I just need my medicines and I need to go home. I can't stay for the meeting. My husband, I have epilepsy also, and my husband and all my neighbors blame all of this with my son on me. And if I stay away too long, I'll just be yelled at and I'll just be hit. And for those of us who are in this work, we can face so much doubt because there's so many challenges in people's lives. But that woman, she was so beautiful and she was so strong. And I saw my daddy in her. I saw my grandmother in her. And it's just I think what my purpose leads me to see is that there are certain things we see as family members, and part of in our own voices, in our own eyes too. And she just helps clarify that part of who I want to make space for, or part of what I want to make space for, is not pushing her home with a medicine, but realizing what it took to get her out of her house, 4 hours of walking. And how do we make space for her emotional and her spirit to be nourished too? What are we making space for? Just the medicine in her pocket, or for her to be seen also?
Yeah, that adds so much, Aditi, to the notion of one of the primary strategic plan goals for NAMI Greater Houston and for the NAMI National is access to care. And people think about that as physical, and it challenges us. I'm watching Carlene Byron's comments on the line here, and she's exciting me with the notion that this is connected to stigma. This is connected to the fact that people get othered, and I think there are two sides to stigma that would maybe carry us to chapter 3, and that is that part of stigma is being rejected, but part of stigma is not being allowed to render your gifts, not being allowed to contribute, not being allowed. And that's when I started out with Patty, that she was so much a spirit of aliveness. And we had the benefit of her gifts in our family for her life in our home. But the rest of the world, they missed out on it. They doggone missed out. And so when I get to this chapter 3 is about COVID. And COVID, we think about this physical, fearful, invisible force, much like a spirit, right? But the thing that Aditi and I were talking about in preparation for this talk was that that really we are in the midst of a relationship pandemic. And what I mean by that, and what we came to, was the fact that yes, there's physical illness and there's grief. So much of the grief is being not shared, separate in nursing homes, hands touching on windows, no hand to hand. That's a relationship crisis. The amount of unemployment and the amount of racial strife that's creating a social pandemic could all be subsumed into the description as a relationship pandemic. And so I wanted to spend the rest of the time that we have in terms of this conference of hearing voice to the fact of this isolation. And I'll start with one quick story.
Quick story because you've got like 1 minute.
We've got 1 minute. Okay, I had COVID. I was alone by myself for a month. I have depressive, and I didn't have no wife, no family, no sons, no thing. And doggone it, my mental health was challenged. My emotional health was challenged, and so we find out that one of the things that is so important is for us as a whole community, all 25, 52 of us, to set our radar to go find the people that are alone, go find the people that are isolated. And in that regard, that's responsibility. That's back to purpose, right? That's our responsibility to go find those. And oftentimes we find them in the least of those settings, right? That's the biblical command. But we're all the least of us in this pandemic, and so to just really reach out. God bless y'all. I think we're at 1939. Aditi, do you want to say goodbye for 21 seconds? 15.
I'd just like to leave everybody with that image of a radar. because I think radar and reflection across distance is just a really powerful frame for us in this time for how we can reach out.
Set your radars.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Go do the work.
Thank you.